And I think that I just have to respectfully go, have a good life.
Welcome back to the Kody Check. Kody Brown didn't wake up one morning and suddenly lose everything. It didn't happen in an instant, and it didn't happen in a single fight or a single decision. The truth is far more tragic. Kody destroyed his own future slowly, quietly, piece by piece, one choice at a time, while convincing himself he was doing everything right. He believed he was building a legacy, a kingdom, a family that would survive anything. But behind the scenes, and sometimes right in front of the cameras, Kody was dismantling the very foundation he claimed to protect. In the early years, people believed in him. Wives believed in him. Children believed in him. Viewers of the show even believed that maybe, just maybe, a plural family could work if there was enough love and enough faith. And for a while, it worked well enough. Everyone played their part, everyone tried to be loyal, everyone tried to keep the dream alive. Yet even in those early days, you can see the cracks, the signs of something that would eventually grow too big to hide. Kody liked being the hero. He loved being at the center of the story, the leader, the problem solver, the man in charge. But leadership is not the same thing as control, and somewhere along the way, Kody forgot the difference. He thought that leadership meant dominance. He thought being a husband meant being obeyed. Being the father of 18 children meant having the last say over every one of their lives. Perhaps most damaging of all, he thought loyalty meant silence. The wives' silence, the kids' silence, everyone's silence if they were foolish enough to disagree with him. What he never realized was that silence is not loyalty. Silence is suffocation. Christine was one of the first to feel it. She tried for years to keep the peace, smile for the camera, say all the right things, be supportive, and be patient. She wanted the dream to work because she'd built her whole life around it. She raised the kids, fed the family, kept the home running, and carried burdens that Kody either did not notice or chose not to. But the more she gave, the less she got. The more she tried, the less he cared. When she asked for affection, he dismissed her. When she expressed loneliness, he brushed it aside. When she tried to share her pain, he called it complaining. And that's when the first piece of Kody's future broke away. The moment he stopped seeing Christine as a woman with needs and began seeing her as an inconvenience. Janelle was next. Janelle wasn't emotional, she wasn't dramatic, she wasn't demanding. She was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who worked and paid the bills, supported the family structure, and reared her children with quiet strength. She didn't ask for romance, she didn't ask for attention, she only asked for one small and simple thing: respect, partnership, equality. But Kody didn't provide it. He wanted her obedience, not her perspective. He wanted her compliance, not her independence. And when she disagreed with him, especially during the pandemic, he treated her not as a wife, but as a disobedient child. And with that, the second piece of Kody's future slipped away: the respect of a woman who once believed in him more than anyone else. Then there was Meri, the first woman he married, the one he built the foundation with, the one who sacrificed and trusted and believed in plural marriage with her whole heart. Meri wasn't perfect, but she was loyal. She stayed through everything, through the addition of each wife, the pain of jealousy, the unraveling of emotional bonds, the public humiliation of their relationship. She stayed because she believed their love was strong enough to survive anything. But to Kody, her loyalty became a burden. It became a reminder of promises he no longer wanted to keep. Instead of working on the relationship, he avoided it. Instead of trying again, he gave up. Instead of loving her, he pushed her away until she was left holding on to a marriage he had already abandoned. And that was another piece of his future lost, the woman who helped him build it in the first place. But the real turning point, the real unraveling of everything Kody had spent years claiming to protect, came when he started demanding obedience instead of connection. When he began talking about patriarchy publicly, not as a joke, not as a metaphor, but as a requirement. When he said, "I should have been the head of this family all along." When he said he needed wives who would conform. When he stopped listening entirely and started dictating every decision, every rule, every moment of their lives. People can follow a leader, people can't follow a tyrant. The tighter Kody held on, the faster his family slipped through his fingers. He didn't see it, of course, because the person destroying your future is the hardest person to recognize, especially when that person is yourself. He pointed fingers at Christine, accusing her of betrayal. He blamed Janelle for not being loyal. He blamed Meri for being too difficult. He blamed his children for not respecting him. He even blamed Robin, the one wife who stayed by his side, for the emotional distance the others felt. But never once did Kody stand still long enough to look within. Never once did he ask the only question that counted: what am I doing wrong? And that was the moment, the devastating, irreversible moment, when his future began collapsing so quickly that even he couldn't ignore it. But the thing about destruction is that it doesn't usually look like destruction at first. It looks like a tense conversation. It looks like a disagreement about rules. It looks like a wife crying quietly off camera. It looks like a child refusing to pick up the phone because they're tired of being scolded. It looks like a man insisting he's right, even when the evidence is right in front of him. These were the signs Kody ignored. These were the moments he dismissed. These were the conversations he walked away from. These were the people he took for granted. Every one of those decisions built the path to where he stands now. Alone, angry, confused, surrounded by the ruins of a family he once claimed to love more than anything. But love requires sacrifice. Love requires humility. Love requires effort. Love requires listening. And Kody did none of those things. He felt love was owed to him simply because he was the husband. He felt loyalty was automatic because he was the father. He felt respect was an entitlement automatically because he demanded it. He never grasped, or perhaps he refused to grasp, the fact that respect is a thing to be earned, not imposed. Love has to be cultivated, not ordered. Marriage is mutual, not one way. Control isn't leadership, and fear isn't loyalty. But the hardest truth of all, Kody didn't lose his family. Kody pushed them away. Christine walked away because her heart could not take the rejection any longer. She walked away because she knew she had earned equal partnership. Meri walked away because finally she had accepted the love she had been waiting for wasn't coming. And even Robin, the last wife standing, found herself married to a man who could no longer recognize the line between leadership and obsession. He convinced himself that he had been betrayed by everyone around him, whereas in fact it was he who had betrayed himself. He had destroyed his future by refusing to see the women in front of him, their needs, their sacrifices, their humanity. He destroyed his future when he chose pride over connection, ego over empathy, and control over compassion. He destroyed his future in trying so hard to be the patriarch that he forgot how to be a husband. And the tragedy is that he didn't see the collapse until it was far too late. By the time the wives left, by the time the children pulled back, by the time the audience saw the truth, the damage had already been done. This is the story of how Kody Brown destroyed his own future, not through one catastrophic moment, but through years and years of choices he believed were right, choices that cost him the family he claimed to cherish, choices that left him isolated in a home built from promises he no longer kept, choices which showed the world that sometimes the biggest threat to a family is the man who insists he's holding it together. And this is only the beginning. Kody Brown never imagined a day when the wives he once called his partners, his companions, his beautiful team, would begin turning away from him one by one. In his mind, he was always the man holding the reins, the one guiding the ship, the father orchestrating a legacy of unity and faith. But what he could never accept was that the reins weren't his to hold, and the family he believed he controlled was quietly slipping away long before the world noticed. The unraveling didn't begin with a fight or a season finale. It began in the spaces between moments, missed connections, broken promises, and a growing emotional distance that Kody refused to acknowledge. There's a kind of blindness that comes with power, an arrogance that wraps itself around a man's mind and convinces him he is untouchable. It was a blindness Kody developed over time, little by little, until slowly but surely the fog wrapped around his brain and it became increasingly difficult for him to see the truth standing in front of him. The wives were not his soldiers. The children were not his audience. They were people, adults with needs and emotions and boundaries. And somewhere along the line, Kody forgot. To him, Leadership meant being obeyed, being respected unquestioningly, being the focal point of every decision. The thing is, though, true leadership takes humility, it takes listening, it takes effort. And effort was the one thing that Kody stopped giving. The shift didn't happen overnight. It began gradually, almost invisibly. At first, it was small frustrations that the wives brushed aside. Christine wanted more time. Janelle wanted cooperation. Meri wanted affection. And Robin wanted peace. But instead of recognizing these needs as normal, healthy needs, Kody took them as personal attacks. Every request felt like a challenge. Every disagreement felt like disloyalty. Every emotional need felt like a burden. And so, instead of stopping the cracks forming in the foundation, Kody ignored them. He thought if he ignored conflict, it would disappear. If he denied reality, then it wasn't as true. And if he kept silent, there was peace. But silence is not peace. It's a ticking clock. And every second of that, the wives felt. Emotionally detached first was Christine, though she masked this fact well. For years, she tried to make it work. She tried to smile through her pain. She tried to sacrifice. She tried to accept the crumbs of affection Kody occasionally offered. Still, her heart was hungry. Not metaphorically, literally starving. She went to bed alone, woke up alone, lived days without warmth, without partnership, without the basic gestures that make a marriage feel alive. She felt invisible. And invisibility is one of the most painful things a woman can experience. It wears her down. It empties her spirit. It makes her question her worth. Christine questioned her worth for far too long. Janelle held everything together during those years. She was the logical one, the backbone, the woman who took on the weight of children, finances, and responsibilities without complaint. She didn't cry on camera. She didn't demand romantic gestures. She didn't ask Kody to change. She simply asked for him to listen, to respect her decisions, to treat her as an equal partner. But instead of seeing her strength, Kody saw independence. Instead of seeing her reliability, he saw distance. Instead of valuing her partnership, he accused her of being disloyal. He pushed her away every time she tried to make things work. And in a tragic twist he never saw coming, Janelle realized she didn't need him. That realization didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. Meanwhile, Meri held on in the space between hope and despair. She held on longer than anyone expected, longer even than Kody expected. She had been emotionally abandoned for years. She was publicly humiliated. Her marriage was little more than a ghost of what it once had been. But ghost marriages carry weight. Meri kept trying because she felt like commitment meant staying, even when staying was breaking her heart. Yet the longer she stayed, the more Kody pulled away. He stopped referring to her as his wife in public. He stopped hanging out with her. He stopped pretending to love her. The tragedy isn't that their marriage ended long before she left. It's that she didn't know it ended. She was still living in a promise Kody had forgotten he'd made. By the time the pandemic hit, the foundation of the family was already weakened. But the pandemic didn't break the Brown family. It revealed the cracks that had been forming for decades. Kody's strict rules became a battleground. His obsession with obedience became the final wedge that drove the family apart. Suddenly, his leadership wasn't just flawed, it was exposed. The wives saw the truth. Kody wasn't trying to protect the family, he was trying to control them. The children saw it too. They felt the imbalance, the favoritism, the sudden rigidity that replaced connection. What hurt them the most wasn't the rules. It was the realization that their father's priority was not them. It was maintaining power. Something shifted in Kody permanently during this time. He no longer wanted mere compliance. He expected it. Every disagreement was a threat, every refusal a betrayal, and every challenge an act of disrespect. He was no longer the loving husband trying to keep his family safe. Instead, he was a man desperate to maintain control of a family already slipping away. Christine saw it as clear as day. Janelle saw it, Meri saw it. Really, the only one not to see it, or refuse to see it, would have to be Kody himself. His determination to enforce his will created a war he could never win. Christine reached her breaking point. She realized she didn't want to be in a marriage where love was conditional, where intimacy was withheld, where her worth depended on her ability to be loyal to rules she never agreed with. The night Kody shrugged at the idea of intimacy with her was the night she emotionally left the marriage. But the moment she packed his belongings, the moment she moved him out of her room, the moment she told him she was done, that was the moment Kody's future truly began crumbling. What Kody didn't understand then, and maybe still doesn't, is that Christine didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she finally loved herself enough to walk away. Janelle followed shortly after, not because she didn't care about the marriage, but the marriage had become unsustainable. Kody blamed her children, blamed her choices, blamed her lack of obedience. But Janelle saw the truth. The man she once admired was gone. In his place was someone who valued control more than connection, hierarchy more than partnership, and who lost sight of the family he once claimed to cherish. Meri's was the quietest of all, the slowest and most tragic. She held on until the end, waiting for the spark to return, for Kody to look at her the way he once did. But eventually, she came to a devastating realization. Kody wasn't coming back, not emotionally, not romantically, not even as a friend. So, she made the decision he never had the courage to make. She walked away. One by one, the wives left, and with each one, Kody blamed them. He blamed Christine for quitting. He blamed Janelle for choosing her kids. He blamed Meri for being too much. He blamed the pandemic, the kids, the stress, the cameras, the critics, everyone but himself. And that is how he destroyed his own future. Not by failing as a father, not by failing as a husband, but by refusing to take even an ounce of responsibility for the collapse. The truth is painfully simple. You cannot save a relationship you do not work on. You cannot hold a family together using fear. You cannot demand loyalty from those you refuse to love fully. And you cannot build a future while ignoring the damage you're causing in the present. Kody felt like he was losing control because the wives were changing. The problem was, the wives weren't changing. They were waking up. Waking up to neglect, waking up to emotional starvation, waking up to favoritism, waking up to a man who expected devotion but gave nothing in return. This is the painful truth that Kody refused to see. His future wasn't taken from him. He threw it away. If Kody Brown is tracing things back to the breakdown of his family, he has a single narrative that he repeats ad nauseum. The wives became disloyal, the kids turned on him, the pandemic broke everything, and none of them followed his lead. But that is just one side of the story, his side. The truth is much deeper, much more painful. His future didn't fall apart because people stopped following him. It fell apart because he stopped being someone worth following. The wives were not perfect. They had flaws, insecurities, fears, and frustrations like everybody else. But what made their situation unbearable was the growing realization that Kody no longer saw them as partners. He saw them as extensions of himself, people meant to reflect his authority, not challenge it. And slowly, they realized that the family they were fighting so hard to protect was not the same family Kody was fighting for. Their vision was built on love, unity, and cooperation. His had become about hierarchy, compliance, and image. Something in Kody hardened in the years leading to the collapse. He was no longer the young father, hopeful that plural marriage could be beautiful. He was defensive, paranoid, angry. The world saw glimpses of it, but the wives lived inside it. They saw how every disagreement turned into a lecture, how every concern was dismissed as disrespect, how every emotional need was labeled drama, and how every attempt at reconciliation became a battlefield where Kody insisted on surrender, not understanding. But what hurt the wives most wasn't the yelling, it wasn't the rules, it wasn't even the favoritism, though that cut deeper than Kody ever acknowledged. What hurt the most was how quickly their pain became an inconvenience to him. They wanted conversations, he wanted compliance. They wanted connection, he wanted control. And as years passed, that desire for control began to consume everything else. There were moments that revealed more than he realized, moments that showed how far Kody had drifted from the man he once wanted to be. Like nights he wouldn't spend time with Christine because she wasn't acting like a good sister wife, or the times he scolded Janelle's boys for having opinions of their own, Or the interviews where he candidly admitted he no longer considered himself married to Meri anymore, long before he ever told her directly. These moments didn't just hurt his wives, they broke the trust that held the family together. Trust does not break in a single blow. It erodes, it weakens, it wears down until nothing is left but resentment and regret. And that's precisely what happened. The moment Kody dismissed Christine's needs as complaining, the trust began to erode. When she opened her heart, he closed his. When she begged for intimacy, he rejected her. When she told him she felt unloved, he shrugged. Every cold response was another crack in a marriage she spent decades trying to protect. And by the time she realized it was gone, she was standing in the ruins alone. Janelle's trust eroded when she saw how differently her children were treated. She watched Kody build a bond with Robin's kids, warm, patient, fatherly, while her sons were criticized, lectured, or ignored. She didn't want favoritism. She wanted fairness. She wanted partnership. She wanted decisions made together, not orders delivered from above. But Kody didn't want to negotiate. He wanted obedience. And Janelle realized she could not build a future with a man who refused to meet her halfway. The trust was lost long ago, way before the catfishing scandal happened, way before cameras caught her tears. She stayed because she hoped. She stayed because she believed that once there was love, it could return. As the years stretched on, though, the distance between them grew so vast that even hope began to feel foolish. She was willing to forgive. She was willing to rebuild. But Kody wasn't willing to try. And you can't fix a marriage alone. These women weren't just wives in a plural family. They were individual people with unique strengths, dreams, and vulnerabilities. And somewhere along the line, Kody stopped seeing them as individuals. He saw them through one single lens, and that was loyalty. If they disagreed, it was disloyal. If they felt hurt, it was disloyal. If they asked for more, it was disloyal. And the more he demanded loyalty of them, the more he pushed them away. But maybe the deepest crack in Kody's future came not from the wives, but from his children. Children see things their parents pretend aren't happening. They notice who listens and who doesn't. They notice who shows up and who makes excuses. They notice who treats them with respect and who treats them like burdens. And Kody, without realizing it, created a divide within his own household. He invested heavily in Robin's kids, not because he loved them more, but because they validated his leadership. They followed the rules. They respected him. They didn't question his choices. They made him feel like the father he believed himself to be. But the other children, especially Janelle's and Christine's older kids, saw the inconsistencies. They saw how their mothers were treated. They saw the emotional neglect. They saw how Kody changed when Robin entered the family, and they weren't afraid to say it out loud. Instead of listening, Kody called them ungrateful. Instead of comprehending, he accused them of manipulating. Instead of bridging the gap, he made it wider. And for some of his kids, that gap became permanent. Relationships don't crumble from one argument. They crumble from years of not being heard. Kody didn't lose his children overnight. He lost them bit by bit, each time he chose criticism over compassion, distance over connection, ego over humility. But one of the most painful truths is that he expected complete loyalty from his children while giving them conditional love. If they were unquestioningly obedient, he was there. If they questioned him, he disappeared. And kids won't forget who showed up for them when life was hard. They remember who held them, who listened to them, who stood by them. Many of Kody's children remember their mothers doing that, not him. Even the younger kids, the ones still at home with him and Robin, were not immune to the heavy weight of family tension. They watched their siblings drift away. They watched the wives fight. They watched Kody become more stressed, more agitated, more desperate to maintain control. And no matter how hard Robin tried to shelter them, they could feel the family slipping away. But through it all, Kody insisted he was the victim, the one being abandoned, the one being disrespected, the one being betrayed. He truly thought that he gave more than he got, that he sacrificed more than anyone else, that he held the family together single-handedly. But the sad reality is that Kody wasn't holding the family together. He was holding them down. His leadership was no longer founded in love. It was founded in fear. Fear of losing control, losing authority, and losing the image built for decades. And fear is no good foundation to build a family on. It generates resentment instead of unity, distance instead of closeness, and silence instead of communication. And eventually, that silence just becomes too much to bear. Christine broke hers first, and she would no longer be quiet. She would no longer pretend that everything was okay. She would no longer give up her happiness for a man who didn't care if she was happy at all. Something inside Kody shattered when she walked out the door, not because he lost a wife, but because he lost the illusion he was still in control. Janelle's exit wasn't dramatic, it was powerful. She was standing up for herself, her children, and her independence. She realized that she didn't need Kody to keep living, and that realization was the thing that took away the authority he felt he had. It wasn't a loud goodbye, but devastating nonetheless. It proved to him that the women he thought would always stay with him could actually walk away from him. Meri's was the last crack, the last missing piece in that original foundation. When she left, that family Kody claimed to lead simply stopped existing. His kingdom fell, not from disobedience, not because of his wives, and not because of the pandemic, but because finally those women figured out they deserved more than the love he was willing to give. The tragedy about Kody's story is not that he accidentally destroyed his future. It's that he destroyed it while actually believing he was doing everything right. He thought leadership meant control. He thought people earned their loyalty through authority instead of love. He thought that no matter what, the family would never leave him because he was the center of their world. But he forgot something very crucial. Nobody stays in a place where they are unloved. He clung to the past, a past in which he was the undisputed leader, the loving father, the husband with 4 wives who supported him. That, however, was the past. The wives had changed, the children grew up, the world has changed, and Kody just refused to change with it. And thus the future he envisioned of unity, legacy, and family harmony crumbled. Not as an act of fate, not because of betrayal, but because he had based it upon a foundation of control, not love. Over the months as the family continued to fray, something inside Kody shifted, though he himself didn't fully understand it. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was scared. Afraid of losing control, afraid of becoming irrelevant, and then really afraid to face the truth he had run from for years, that the wives were no longer orbiting around him as they once did. He could feel it in every conversation, every disagreement, every questioning glance. The world he built, or thought he built, was imploding, and he didn't know how to stop it. Not because he was powerless, but because the only thing that could save it was the one thing he refused to do: take responsibility. Responsibility is heavy. It forces a man to look inward, to acknowledge his mistakes, to accept that he played a role in the pain of the people he loves. But Kody wasn't ready to carry that weight. Instead, he looked for someone, anyone, to blame. Christine became the first target. Janelle followed. Meri was blamed indirectly through silence and avoidance. Even Robin felt the sting of his frustration, though she tried desperately to hold the pieces together. But blame is a temporary salve. It soothes the ego, but poisons the relationships. And the more Kody blamed others, the more isolated he became. The moment that defined this shift wasn't dramatic. Neither was it a wrenching fight, nor a tearful confession. It was subtle, quiet, devastating. It happened over a conversation with the kids as they tried to articulate their fears, frustrations, and confusions about what was going on with the family. They were not attacking him. They were not disrespecting him. They were begging him to listen. But instead of hearing their words, Kody heard criticism. Instead of understanding their pain, he felt accused. And instead of acknowledging their emotional needs, he defended himself. And in that moment, something inside his children broke. They realized they weren't speaking to the father they grew up with. They were speaking to a man consumed by the need to be right, a man who couldn't tolerate vulnerability, Not theirs, not his own. A man who saw as disloyalty any emotion other than praise. For many of the older kids, that was the beginning of the end. They stepped back, they shut down, they stopped trying to connect because every attempt resulted in conflict. Well, children don't stop loving their parents, but they do stop trying when trying becomes too painful. The divide between Kody and his children grew wider with every passing day. He thought they were disrespecting him, and they thought he didn't care anymore. The saddest part is that both sides were hurting, yet neither knew how to reach the other. That disconnect spilled into every part of the family. Holidays became tense, birthdays complicated, and gatherings awkward. And through it all, Kody believed he was the victim of a mutiny he didn't deserve. But what Kody didn't understand, what he still may not understand, is that love cannot survive fear. And his children were afraid of his reactions. They were afraid of disappointing him. They were afraid of the emotional cost of honesty. When a father becomes harder to talk to, children stop talking. And when they stop talking, the relationship dies quietly, piece by piece. Meanwhile, the wives were on their own emotional journeys. Christine had already made up her mind to go, but it wasn't easy to leave. She felt guilty. She felt scared. She felt like she was abandoning something she invested decades of her life into. But she also felt free, and that freedom came with clarity. For the first time in years, she could see Kody without the fog of obligation. She could see his patterns, his dismissiveness, his emotional inflexibility. And she realized one important thing. She didn't want her daughters to think this was what love looked like. Janelle was still caught in the middle. Part of her wanted to stay, to keep trying, to see if things could be repaired. But another part of her, the part that had been ignored, belittled, and invalidated, was waking up. She saw how Kody treated her children compared to others. She saw the lack of partnership. She saw how he weaponized loyalty against her. And she knew that staying would mean losing herself. Janelle isn't a woman who makes decisions quickly, but once she makes them, she doesn't look back. And when the time came, she didn't. Meri was the last one to hang on, stuck in a vortex of memory and hope. She remembered the early years. She remembered the promises. She remembered the love. And she believed deep down that love could return. But the longer she waited, the clearer it became. She was waiting for a version of Kody that no longer existed. She was fighting for a marriage that only she was trying to revive. And when the truth finally hit her, that Kody saw her as nothing more than a family friend, she knew she couldn't stay in a marriage with only one participant. Then there was Robin, the wife who never wanted the family to fall apart, the wife who dreamed of unity, the wife who tried harder than anyone to keep the peace. But Robin carried a weight she didn't ask for. As the other wives left one by one, she was left standing beside a man crumbling under the weight of his own choices. She watched him break down, lash out, spiral emotionally, and she felt the crushing responsibility of being the last one standing, the last one expected to keep him stable, the last one left to hold the pieces of a broken dream. But even Robin couldn't stop the collapse, because the collapse wasn't her doing. It wasn't Christine's doing. It wasn't Janelle's doing. It wasn't Meri's doing. It was Kody's, born from years of emotional neglect, favoritism, inflexibility, and a belief that love meant obedience. The saddest part of this story isn't that Kody lost his marriages. It's that he never realized he was losing them until they were already gone. He never saw Christine's tears. He never saw Janelle's quiet sadness. He never saw Meri's loneliness. He never saw the kids pulling away. He never saw the exhaustion in Robin's eyes. He only saw disobedience, rebellion, disrespect. And by the time he finally opened his eyes, he was standing alone. But even then, instead of introspection, Kody chose anger. He lashed out at the wives who left. He blamed the kids for choosing sides. He accused people of betrayal. He even blamed the audience, calling them judgmental and unfair. Still, every finger he pointed further demonstrated he wasn't prepared to take the truth. You cannot be abandoned by people you pushed away. The implosion of the Brown family didn't happen suddenly. It was a gradual, painful erosion after years of unhealthy patterns, controlling behavior, emotional withdrawal, selective affection, unrealistic expectations, and finally, broken communications. Underlying everything is a profound fear that Kody never confronted, the fear of losing the image he had so painstakingly constructed. To Kody, plural marriage wasn't just a lifestyle, it was an identity, a crown he wore, a badge of honor. To lose it was to lose the story he told himself about who he was, and the loss proved to be more than he could handle. So instead of acknowledging his own role, he clung to anger, because anger was easier than grief. Anger was easier than vulnerability. Anger was easier than accountability. But anger cannot rebuild anything. It just destroys. The saddest moments came after the wives had left. Kody walked through an empty home and couldn't grasp how a place filled with laughter, noise, chaos, and life could be silent. He sat waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to check in on him, for someone to reassure him that he was still important. But the calls didn't come, the texts didn't come, the visits didn't come. The family had moved on, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. For years, the wives and children shaped their lives around Kody's emotional needs. They tried to keep the peace, avoid conflict, and protect his feelings. But once they had left, once they had breathed fresh air, once they had stepped into a space without walking on eggshells, it dawned on them how suffocating things had been. And none of them wanted to return to that suffocation. The greatest tragedy in Kody's life is that he ruined his own future without ever realizing he was doing it. He thought he led, he thought he protected, he thought he guided, but what he was actually doing was controlling. And when you lead through fear rather than love, people will follow only as long as they cannot leave. Once they find the strength to walk away, they never look back. The wives didn't leave the family, they took themselves back. And in that, they sealed the fate of the kingdom Kody had spent his life trying to build. A kingdom that fell, in the end, not by disloyalty, but because the king would not listen to the cries of his own people. And the most heartbreaking truth of all, Kody still doesn't understand what happened. When the dust finally settled around the Brown family, Kody was left standing amidst the ruins of something he once believed would last forever. For decades, he spoke about plural marriage as if it were a calling from heaven, a divine mission, a legacy worth any sacrifice. But in the end, what remained wasn't a legacy, but an echo of broken trust, shattered relationships, and a man coming to terms with the truth he spent years running from. He destroyed his own future. It was not just the wives that hit him hardest. It was the silence, the quiet realization that nobody was waiting for him, nobody was depending on him, nobody needed him the way he once believed they did. The home that once bustled with activity, with its laughter, conflict, and chaos, was unnervingly still. Too often, Kody found himself pacing the hallways, feeling the weight of emptiness pressing in upon him. Every quiet corner reminded him of a moment he had taken for granted. Every empty room reminded him of a fight he mishandled. Every memory reminded him of a version of himself that no longer existed. For the first time, Kody wasn't the center of anybody's world. Not Christine's, not Janelle's, not Meri's. Not even Robin, his wife who stayed, could fill the void left behind by years of emotional disconnection. She tried more than anyone to support him, comfort him, and encourage him. But even with her beside him, he felt profoundly alone. Because the truth he had been running from was impossible to ignore now. Love cannot thrive in the shadow of control. Every effort Kody made to connect with the kids was awkward, or distant, or met with hesitation. Some kids were polite but guarded. Others kept conversations short, while a few barely responded at all. And while Kody knew they were being unfair, deep down he knew the real reason why. He hadn't been present. He hadn't listened. He hadn't shown up in the ways a father should. Now they were protecting themselves against the emotional fallout he had spent years creating. Kody watched from a distance as the women built new lives without him. Christine was glowing, thriving, full of joy he hadn't seen in her for years, maybe decades. Janelle is independent, confident, surrounded by her grown children, and finally making choices for herself. Meri has found strength in her solitude, embracing her freedom rather than mourning the loss of a marriage that had died long ago. And though Kody tried to frame their happiness as betrayal, he knew deep down it wasn't. It was the natural result of being set free from something that had been slowly suffocating them. It was a blow harder than anything he had expected, the realization that the wives were happier without him. All these years, he had considered himself the binding force between them and the family. Now, while watching them step into their new lives, he began to wonder if he had in fact been the wedge driving them apart. But introspection is hard for a man who has spent a decade defending himself. Even as he struggled with loneliness, flashes of anger still surfaced. He blamed the wives for giving up. He blamed the children for turning against him. He blamed the pandemic for making everything too complicated. And yet, every time he pointed a finger outward, something inside him felt heavier, because each excuse pushed him further away from the truth he was trying to outrun. And that truth was simple. The fall of the Brown family had not been precipitated by disloyalty. It had been precipitated by lack of love.